The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Fairfield Park, painting the grass in hues of gold and amber. Laughter and distant cheers echoed from the soccer field, where young players dashed across the turf, chasing both the ball and fleeting childhood moments. Parents stood along the sidelines, chatting casually, while teenagers lounged on benches, lost in their phones. Under the shade of a towering oak tree sat 16-year-old Michael, his presence quiet yet deliberate. Dressed in a fitted black suit with a crisp white shirt, he was an unusual sight in a place filled with casual joggers and families in weekend attire. His polished shoes rested firmly on the ground, his back straight, exuding an air of quiet discipline. In his hands, a worn paperback lay open, though his dark eyes occasionally lifted to scan the park with measured awareness. Michael wasn't here for leisure. He was waiting for his younger brother, Jordan, who was finishing up soccer practice. It was a responsibility he had taken upon himself, a promise made to his mother to ensure Jordan always got home safely. But Michael's posture wasn't just that of an older brother. Years of martial arts training had instilled in him a keen sense of observation, an ability to read situations before they unfolded. As the distant rumble of motorcycle engines shattered the peaceful evening, Michael instinctively knew something was about to change. The distant rumble of motorcycles shattered the peaceful atmosphere of the park. At first, Michael barely noticed, assuming it was just another group of riders passing through. But as the engines grew louder, he finally looked up from his book. 5 bikers had pulled into the lot, their leather jackets and heavy boots making them stand out sharply against the backdrop of families enjoying the evening breeze. Michael returned to his book, but a lingering unease settled in his stomach. Something about the way they were scanning the area, their eyes sweeping over the park before landing on him, made his instincts bristle. He had learned to trust those instincts. Years of training had taught him that danger rarely announced itself. It crept in silently, disguised as something harmless, until it was too late. The bikers didn't linger near their motorcycles for long. One of them, a burly man with a shaved head, nudged his friend and started walking toward Michael. 2 others followed, their footsteps heavy against the gravel. They moved with a purpose that sent a cold chill crawling up his spine. Michael remained still, his fingers carefully folding the corner of his book before setting it aside. He took a slow breath, keeping his expression neutral as the men approached. The burly biker stopped just a few feet away, his stance wide, his smirk lazy but calculated. "What are you doing here, kid?" he asked, his voice rough like gravel underfoot. Michael met his gaze evenly. "Waiting for my brother," he replied, his tone polite but firm. The man exchanged a glance with his companions before chuckling under his breath. "This doesn't look like your kind of place." Michael's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay composed. "It's a public park," he answered, watching their movements carefully. The biker's smirk faded slightly. "Got a smart mouth, huh?" He stepped closer, just enough for Michael to catch the scent of leather and cheap beer clinging to his jacket. The other 2 men shifted, subtly positioning themselves around him. Michael could feel the tension tightening like a wire, coiling, waiting for something or someone to make the first move. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Never let them see you sweat." So he didn't. Instead, he exhaled slowly, his hands resting calmly on his knees, though every muscle in his body was prepared for what was coming next. Michael kept his breathing steady, his eyes locked on the bikers who loomed over him. He could feel the pressure mounting, a silent battle of control as they tested him, waiting for a reaction. But he wouldn't give them one. Not yet. Then, a voice cut through the tension. "Leave him alone." Michael's stomach dropped. He turned his head slightly, enough to see Jordan standing a few yards away, his small frame tense, fists clenched at his sides. Sweat still clung to his forehead from soccer practice, his jersey slightly wrinkled. His younger brother had no idea what kind of situation he had just walked into. The bikers, however, noticed immediately. The burly man's smirk widened as he glanced between the 2 boys. His friends exchanged knowing looks, their amusement darkening into something far more dangerous. "This your little brother?" one of them asked, nodding toward Jordan. Michael forced himself to stay calm. His instincts screamed at him to move, to step in between them, but he knew any sudden reaction would only escalate things. Instead, he spoke carefully, his voice even. "Jordan, go back to the field." But Jordan didn't move. "Not until they leave," he said, his voice shaking slightly but still defiant. The burly biker chuckled. "Oh, we've got a tough one here." He took a step toward Jordan, slow and deliberate. "Maybe we should teach both of you a little respect." Michael's entire body went rigid, his hands, still resting on his knees, curled into fists. He had been patient, he had assessed, he had given them every chance to walk away. But now they had crossed a line. His voice dropped to a deadly calm. "Don't touch him." The laughter stopped. The burly biker raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "Or what, kid? You gonna stop us?" Michael finally stood, his movements controlled, precise. The shift in his stance was subtle, but to someone trained, it was unmistakable. His feet planted firmly, his posture balanced, his weight distributed just enough to be ready for whatever came next. The bikers noticed. The way their amusement flickered, their stance adjusting just slightly, told Michael they felt it too. They had mistaken him for an easy target. Now they were starting to realize their mistake. The air between them grew heavy. Michael could feel the shift, the unspoken challenge settling between him and the bikers. They had underestimated him, assumed he was just another quiet kid who would back down the moment they pushed too hard. But now, their laughter had faded, replaced by something more cautious. The burly man, clearly the leader, scoffed, but Michael could see the tension creeping into his posture. "What's this?" he sneered, tilting his head. "You think you're some kind of fighter?" Michael didn't respond. He didn't need to. His stance spoke for him. Years of training had taught him that the loudest men were often the weakest. It was the ones who stayed silent, who moved with precision, that held true power. One of the bikers, a tall man with a scar cutting across his cheek, took the first step. "Let's see what you got, kid." He lunged forward, fast but sloppy. Michael shifted to the side effortlessly, his movements smooth, controlled. As the biker's hand shot out to grab him, Michael twisted his body just enough to redirect the force, using his opponent's own momentum against him. A sharp pivot, a well-placed foot sweep, and the man was sent stumbling forward, barely catching himself before hitting the ground. The crowd around them gasped. The second biker, more impatient than the first, rushed in with a wild swing. But Michael had already anticipated it. He ducked low, his body reacting faster than thought, before delivering a sharp, precise strike to the man's ribs. The impact forced the air from his lungs, and he staggered back, clutching his side. The burly leader clenched his jaw, his cocky expression faltered for the first time. "All right, kid," he growled. "Enough games." He lunged. Michael was ready. As the man reached for him, Michael sidestepped and countered with a sharp, controlled strike to his forearm, forcing him to recoil. Before the biker could recover, Michael stepped in, his body a blur of movement. A quick, measured kick to the side of the knee sent the man dropping to one leg. Then, with the precision of years of disciplined training, Michael pivoted, his palm striking the man's shoulder, forcing him back even further. The entire park had gone silent. The bikers, who moments ago had moved with confidence, now hesitated. They had come here expecting an easy target. Instead, they had found someone they never should have challenged. A heavy silence fell over the park, the only sound the distant cheers of kids finishing their soccer game. The air buzzed with tension as the bikers hesitated, their confidence shaken. What had begun as an attempt to intimidate a teenager had turned into something none of them had expected. Michael stood firm, his breathing steady, his posture unwavering. His sharp eyes tracked every movement from the men in front of him, but he didn't advance. He had already made his point. The question was whether they were smart enough to accept it. The burly leader clenched his fists, his pride visibly wounded. His two companions, still recovering from Michael's precise counterattacks, looked less eager to continue. The one clutching his ribs shifted uncomfortably, while the other, still on one knee, seemed reluctant to rise again. A murmur ran through the onlookers. Parents, teenagers, even kids stood frozen, their attention locked on the unfolding scene. Someone pulled out their phone, capturing every second of what was happening. The shift was undeniable. The power dynamic had flipped. Michael had given them a choice: walk away or lose whatever shred of dignity they had left. The leader's face burned red with frustration. His pride demanded retaliation, but his instincts told him otherwise. He had never imagined a kid in a suit would be his downfall. Michael tilted his head slightly. "It's over," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Walk away." The words stunned more than any strike could have. The leader exhaled sharply, his nostrils flaring, but he didn't move forward. Instead, he turned to his crew, his jaw tightening. "Let's go," he muttered through gritted teeth. The others hesitated, still caught between their bruised egos and the painful reality of their defeat. Slowly, they started backing away, each movement watched closely by the crowd. They turned toward their bikes, shaking their heads, muttering curses under their breath. The leader shot Michael one last glare. "This ain't over, kid," he spat, his pride still refusing to let him fully surrender. Michael didn't react. He had heard enough empty threats in his life to know which ones carried weight. This wasn't one of them. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and roared away, the tension in the air finally broke. A wave of murmurs and hushed conversations rippled through the park. Parents who had been watching in stunned silence exchanged glances. A few people clapped. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Then, a voice rang out from the crowd. That was incredible. It came from one of the teenage boys who had been playing soccer nearby. Soon, others joined in. Some were in awe, others inspired. Even parents who had been hesitant about the confrontation seemed impressed by the way Michael had handled himself. Jordan ran up to his brother, his face a mix of worry and excitement. "Michael, that was insane. Are you okay?" Michael turned to his younger brother, his expression softening. He placed a reassuring hand on Jordan's shoulder. "I'm fine," he said with a small smile. "Let's go home." As they walked away, Michael felt the weight of what had just happened settle in his chest. He had made his stand. He had defended himself and his brother without letting the situation spiral into unnecessary violence. And, most importantly, he had shown everyone that true strength wasn't about aggression. It was about control. As Michael and Jordan walked away from the park, the noise of the onlookers faded behind them. The sun had started its slow descent, casting long shadows on the pavement. A faint hum of distant traffic filled the silence between them. Jordan, still buzzing with adrenaline, stole glances at his older brother, his mind racing with everything that had just happened. "Michael," he finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. I don't even know what to say. How did you do that? How did you stay so calm?" Michael exhaled, slipping his hands into his pockets. "It's not about staying calm," he said. "It's about knowing what to do and when to do it. Fear is natural, Jordan. It's what you do with it that matters." Jordan kicked a small rock on the sidewalk, his brow furrowed. "But they were huge," he muttered, "and there were 3 of them." Michael smiled slightly. "Size doesn't matter as much as people think. Strength isn't just about muscles. It's about control, discipline, and knowing how to use what you have." They were angry and reckless. That made them predictable. Jordan shook his head, still struggling to process it all. "But weren't you scared? Not even a little?" Michael stopped walking, turning to his younger brother. He placed a steady hand on Jordan's shoulder. "Of course I was," he admitted. "Fear isn't weakness. It's a tool. If you let it control you, you lose. But if you use it to stay focused, it sharpens you. I wasn't trying to be a hero, Jordan. I just wanted to get us home safe." Jordan looked up at his brother, his admiration evident. "I wish I could be like that." Michael chuckled, shaking his head. "You don't need to be like me, Jordan. You just need to be ready when the time comes. And that doesn't mean fighting. It means knowing when to stand up for yourself and when to walk away." The younger boy nodded slowly, absorbing every word. As they continued walking, the tension from earlier seemed to ease, replaced by a quiet understanding between them. Jordan had always looked up to his older brother, but today was different. Today, he had seen firsthand what true strength looked like, and he knew, without a doubt, that no matter what happened, Michael would always be there to protect him. As Michael and Jordan approached their home, the familiar glow of the porch light welcomed them. Their mother stood waiting at the door, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The moment they stepped onto the porch, she spoke, her voice calm yet laced with concern. "You're late," she said, scanning their faces as if searching for unspoken words. Michael glanced at Jordan, then back at his mother. He knew there was no point in sugarcoating the truth. Something happened at the park, he admitted. Their mother's eyes sharpened. What kind of something? Michael hesitated, then explained everything. The bikers, their threats, the confrontation, and how he had handled the situation. He kept his tone steady, making sure to emphasize that he had done what he had to, not out of recklessness, but because there was no other choice. As he spoke, his mother remained silent, listening intently. When he finished, a heavy pause settled between them. She finally exhaled, shaking her head. Michael, I'm proud of you for protecting your brother. And I'm grateful you're both safe, but... Her voice softened, the worry behind it evident. Violence, even when justified, is dangerous. You were outnumbered. Anything could have gone wrong. Michael nodded. I know, Mom, and I wasn't looking for a fight, but they weren't going to stop. She studied him for a moment, then reached out, cupping his face gently. You're growing into a strong young man, Michael. But strength isn't just about knowing how to fight. It's about knowing when not to. Michael swallowed, her words settling deep. I wasn't trying to prove anything, he said quietly. I just couldn't let them hurt Jordan. She smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes. That's what worries me, she murmured. Because people like them, they don't forget, and I don't want you thinking you always have to be the one standing between danger and the people you love. Michael met her gaze, understanding what she wasn't saying. He had won this time. But what about the next? She pulled him into a hug, holding him close. Promise me, she whispered, that you'll always think before you act, that you'll choose your battles wisely. Michael nodded against her shoulder. I promise. As she pulled away, she turned to Jordan, ruffling his hair. And you, she said gently. No more wandering off, okay? Jordan grinned sheepishly. Okay, Mom. They stepped inside, the warmth of home wrapping around them. And though the night had been long, Michael knew one thing for sure. This was the kind of strength that truly mattered. As Michael lay in bed that night, his mother's words echoed in his mind. Strength isn't just about knowing how to fight. It's about knowing when not to. He had spent years training his body, perfecting his technique, mastering the art of self-defense. But tonight had proven something more true. Strength wasn't just about skill. It was about responsibility. Michael hadn't fought to win. He had fought to protect. But as his mother had reminded him, standing up for what's right came with consequences. The world wasn't fair, and people like the bikers didn't forget easily. But even knowing that, he wouldn't change a thing. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about standing firm despite the fear, about knowing that sometimes you are the only one who can make a difference. Michael had protected his brother, not because he wanted to fight, but because he had no choice. And that's what defines a warrior, not violence. But the wisdom to know when action is necessary. So ask yourself, when the moment comes, will you stand up or will you look away? Because sometimes doing nothing is the most dangerous choice of all. If you believe in standing up for what's right, comment 1 below. If you think there's room for improvement, comment 2. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people can hear stories of courage and resilience. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next inspiring story.